Page 93. Under the pretense of military provisions supplied to generals. Therefore, he, Attila, said, after the Medes, Parthians, and Persians were conquered, he would shake off the name by which the Romans wished to call him and the rank with which they thought they had honored him, and would force them to address him as emperor instead of general. Even now, when angry, he was used to say that his servants were the generals of that ruler, the emperor, and that he himself had leaders of worth equal to the emperors of the Romans. There would be, in short, an increase in his present power, and God had revealed this in bringing to light the sword of Ares. This was a sacred object honored among the Scythian kings, since it was dedicated to the overseer of wars. It had been hidden in ancient times and then discovered through the agency of an ox. P.Fr10 when a herdsman noticed one of his herd limping and found no reason for such a wound. Being disturbed, he followed the tracks of blood. At length he came upon a sword which the heifer had heedlessly trodden on while grazing the grass. He dug it up and bore it directly to Attila. He rejoiced at this gift and thought, since he was a man of high spirit, that he had been appointed chieftain of the whole world, and that through the sword of Mars supremacy in war had been granted to him. P.Fr8c to D. Just as each of us desired to say something about the present situation, Onagesius came out, and we went to him to learn about the affairs we were engaged in. Having spoken first to some barbarians, he ordered me to ask Maximinus what man of consular rank the Romans were sending as ambassador to Attila. When I came to the tent, I told what had been said to me, and deliberated with Maximinus as to what I ought to say regarding the matters about which the barbarians sought information from us. I returned to Onagesius and said that the Romans wished him to come to them to talk about the disputes, and if they should fail to obtain this, the emperor would send out whomever he wished as ambassador. Immediately, he ordered me to fetch Maximinus, page 94, into Attila's presence. When Maximinus came out a little later, he said that the barbarian wished either Nomus the consul of 445 or Anatolius or Senator 56 to be sent as ambassador, and would not receive any other except the men named. When Maximinus had answered that by naming men for an embassy, he must needs render them suspect to the emperor, Attila had said that if they did not choose to do what he wished, the disputes would be settled by arms. When we returned to our tent, the father of Orestes, Atillas, came and said, Attila invites you both to a banquet, and this will start about the 9th hour of the day. We waited for the right time, and when those of us who had been invited to the feast and the ambassadors of the Western Romans had arrived, we stood on the threshold before Attila. The cupbearers gave us a cup according to local custom, so that we might pray before sitting down. When this was done and we had tasted the cup, we went to the seats in which we were to sit while dining. All the chairs were ranged along the walls of the house on either side. In the middle sat Attila on a couch, another couch being set behind him, and back of this steps led up to his bed, which was covered with white linens and colored embroideries for ornament, just as the Hellenes and Romans prepare for those who marry. The position of those dining on the right of Attila is considered most honorable, and second the position on the left, where we happen to be, and where Barracus, a Goth but still a noble among the Scythians, sat above us. Onagesius sat on a chair at the right of the king's couch, and opposite Onagesius two of Attila's sons sat on a chair. The eldest son sat on his couch, not near him, but at the end, looking at the ground out of respect for his father. When all were arranged in order, a cupbearer approached and offered Attila an ivy wood cup of wine. He took it and saluted the first in rank, and the one honored by the greeting stood up. It was not right for him to sit down until the king had either tasted the wine or drunk it up and had given the cup back to the cupbearer. All those present honored him in the same way as he remained seated, taking the cups and, after a salutation, tasting them. Each guest had his own cupbearer, who had to come forward in order when Attila's cupbearer retired. After the second man had been honored, and the others in order, Attila greeted us also with the same ritual according to the order of the seats. When everyone had been honored by this salutation, the cupbearers went out, and tables for 3 or 4 or more men were set up next to that of Attila. From these each was able to partake of the things placed on his plate without leaving the original arrangement of chairs. Attila's servant was the first to enter, bearing a platter full of meat, and then the servants who waited on the rest placed bread and viands on the tables. While sumptuous food had been prepared, served on silver plates, for the other barbarians, and for us. For Attila, there was nothing but meat on a wooden trencher. He showed himself temperate in all other ways too, for gold and silver goblets were offered to the men at the feast, but his mug was of wood. His dress too was plain, having care for nothing other than to be clean, nor was the sword by his side, nor the clasps of his barbarian boots, nor the bridle of his horse, like those of other Scythians, adorned with gold or gems or anything of high price. When the food placed on the first platters had been consumed, we all stood up, and no one went back to his seat until each, in the previous order, had drunk the goblet of wine which was presented to him, with a prayer that Attila should be healthy. When he had been honored in this way, we sat down, and a second plate with edibles was placed on each table. After all had partaken of this, and had stood up in the same way, and again drunk wine, we sat down. As evening came on, pine torches were lit up, and two barbarians, advancing in front of Attila, sang songs which they had composed, chanting his victories and his virtues in war. Those at the feast looked at the men. Some took delight in the verses, some, reminded of wars, were excited in their souls, and others, whose bodies were weakened by time and whose spirits were compelled to rest, gave way to tears. After the songs, here is the transcription for the second page, page 96. Page 96. To tears. After the songs, a certain crazed Scythian came forward, who forced everyone to burst out laughing by uttering monstrous and unintelligible words and nothing at all saying. After him, Zircon, the Moor, entered. P.Fr. 11. This man, a Scythian so-called, was a Moor by race. On account of the deformity of his body, the lisp of his voice, and his appearance, he was an object of laughter. He was somewhat short, hump-shouldered, with distorted feet, and a nose indicated only by the nostrils because of its exceeding flatness. He was presented to Aspar, son of Artiberius, during the time he spent in Libya, and was captured when the barbarians invaded Thrace, and was brought to the Scythian kings. Attila could not endure the sight of him, but Bleda was exceedingly pleased with him, not only when he uttered comical words, but also when he walked about in silence and moved his body clumsily. He was with him when he feasted and when he was on a campaign, wearing, on these expeditions, armor aimed at causing merriment. Bleda held him in high esteem, and when he ran away along with other Roman captives, he neglected the others completely, but ordered him to be sought for with all diligence. When he saw him caught and brought back to him in chains, he laughed and, having slackened his anger, asked the reason for his flight and why he considered the life of the Romans better than that among them. Zircon answered that his flight was a crime, but that he had reason for his crime, namely that no wife had been given to him. Bleda, being reduced to further laughter, gave him from among the well-born women a wife who had been one of the attendants on the queen, but who, on account of some misdemeanor, was no longer in her service. So he passed all his time in Bleda's company. After the latter's death, Attila gave Zircon as a gift to Aetius, the general of the Western Romans, who sent him back to Aspar. P.Fr. 8c to d. Edico had persuaded him to come to Attila to recover through his influence the wife he had received in marriage in the country of the barbarians, since he was favored by Bleda. He had left her in Scythia when he was... Here is the transcription for the provided page, page 97. Page 97, sent as a gift from Attila to Aetius. But he was disappointed in his hope, for Attila was angry because he had returned to his country. At the time of the banquet, he came forward, and by his appearance, his dress, his voice, and the words he confusedly uttered, for he mixed the tongue of the Huns and the Goths with that of the Latins, he softened everyone except Attila and caused unquenchable laughter to arise. But Attila remained unmoved and his expression unaltered. Nor in speech nor action did he reveal that he had any laughter in him, except when his youngest son, Ernak was the boy's name, came in and stood before him. He pinched the lad's cheeks and looked on him with serene eyes. I was surprised that he should take small account of his other sons, but give his attention to this one, until a barbarian sitting beside me, who knew the Latin language, warning me to repeat nothing of what he was about to tell me, said that the seers had prophesied to Attila that his race would fail, but would be restored by this son. Since they were dragging out the night in the feast, we retired, not wishing to continue with the drinking any longer. When the day came, we went to Onagesius and said that we ought to be dismissed, so as not to waste time to no purpose. He said that Attila also desired to send us away. After a short time, he took counsel with the picked men on Attila's resolutions and drew up the letters to be handed to the emperor, his secretaries and Rusticius being present. This man, sprung from the land of Upper Moesia, had been captured in war and, on account of his skill in speech, was employed in drawing up letters for the barbarian. When he came out of the meeting, we pleaded with him for the liberation of the wife of Silas and her children, who had been sold into slavery in the capture of Ratiaria. He did not oppose their liberation, but wished to sell them for a great deal of money. We entreated him to pity them for their misfortune and consider their former happiness. And he went to Attila and dismissed the woman for 500 pieces of gold and sent the boys as a gift to the emperor.